High-resolution color graphics.
This land of high technology.
The revolution in technology that made the information age possible.
Those kids are not afraid of computers.
Welcome to This Week in Retro for the week of September 28th. Coming up on today's show,
an iconic piece of Japanese real estate shuts its doors.
the rise and fall of Sierra,
A brand new game for the Turbografx 16.
and Windows XP has leaked.
All this and more on This Week in Retro.
Up-to-date news.
For out-of-date tech.
Neil, we start today's show off with kind of a sad story submitted by Paul, aka Hermsky, to our show subreddit. One of the real estate landmarks of retro gaming paradise, Akihabra, is closing down. The iconic Sega building, home to floor after floor of arcade and crane games, has shut its doors after being open for 17 years. Neil, have you made any pilgrimages to Japan? Boy, it's a hard word to say. To avail yourself of the retro gaming scene there?
Not to Japan. I'm a well-travelled man, John, but Asia has so far eluded me, and everyone I talk to who's been to Japan on a retro pilgrimage just raves about the experience. You know, the people, the places, the bargains that are to be had, especially if you've got the room to take a spare suitcase with you. Interesting that this place opened 17 years ago, because that would suggest that it was, you know, moving in the retro space from the very beginning, I guess.
Right. I think that they had an eye towards that scene, and going backwards from the very beginning, they were looking to capitalize. Because remember, 17 years ago was about the time that Sega made its dramatic departure from the hardware scene. And I think that they were probably looking for a way to capitalize on their previous forays into the world of gaming while moving forward as a publisher on other platforms.
Sure. And for UK listeners, that's Sega. How about you, John? Have you been over to Japan?
Yeah. About 10 years ago, actually more than 10 years ago now, I was lucky enough to take a couple trips to Japan when I spent a couple years teaching English in South Korea. The main highlight of my first trip was going to Tokyo and going to Akihabara. And I still remember what it was like stepping out of the subway and seeing this. It looked like Las Vegas, except instead of casinos, it was all multi-story arcade buildings and game shops. I put a link under this story in the subreddit to a video I shot there of all the places I visited. It was unbelievable. The highlight for me was actually a store called Super Potato.
Named everyone mentions this one when they go there.
Potato. Of course, named in the grand Japanese tradition of ridiculous English names. It was literally 4 stories of nothing but retro arcade games and games for sale. I'm talking about stacks and stacks of PC Engines, Neo Geos, Saturns. And at the time, this was all way cheaper than what you could get them for in the US. I didn't buy a lot of actual gaming items because I didn't bring the spare suitcase, as you said. I didn't have much luggage space, so I bought a ton of tchotchkes, though, because I'm all about the tchotchkes, Neil. I got some mini dioramas based on Konami arcade games. I got the Japan exclusive Famicom edition of the Game Boy Micro, which has the color scheme of the original Famicom plus some really great packaging.
The lovely red and gold Game Boy Micro is a great
That's
item.
Right. The highlight of my trip was definitely sitting atop the throne built of Famicom games on the top story of Super Potato. This thing was amazing. I felt like the king of the world, Neil. It was an amazing trip, and they say that the scene isn't what it was. I think that a lot of people have caught on to the fact that you could bring a spare suitcase, go home and sell all of this stuff, and make a profit. And so what's happened is that the stores have now cut out the middleman and now ship internationally, and they figured out ways to make that profitable.
Right.
So it may not be the boon financially that it was. You may not be able to save as much money going over there, especially with the cost of air travel right now, but it's still an experience worth having.
Yeah, I've had people tell me it's not just about going to buy and then come back and make a profit. It's, for a lot of people, it's just covering the cost of the trip. To bring back enough to cover the cost of the trip and then keep a few items for yourself. And not just games. You've got all of those crazy peripherals, like the controllers for train simulators and things like that. All this crazy stuff. So, I mean, what you've described is, what I would hope for when I go over there, 4 stories of, arcade and console gaming. But I'm always interested to know, is there an 8 or a 16-bit micro scene in these stores over there? Did you ever see an Apple II or an Amiga in the corner tucked away in these shops? Or is it just all about the consoles and the arcades?
I saw nothing related to computers while I was over there. I never saw an Apple II. I never saw an Amiga. I didn't even see computers that were, quote unquote, big in Japan, like the MSX or the Sharp X68000.
Sure.
My guess is that even though I'm sure these machines were popular, their resale appeal for the people that are running these shops is limited because they're huge in a lot of cases. You can fit about 8 to 10 PC engines in the space of a Sharp X68000.
Yeah.
They're also fragile. These classic computers, as you well know, you jostle them the wrong way, or you bump them, or the capacitors blow, and then they're dead. And, these machines were more expensive from the get-go, so you have to sell them for more. And I just feel like consoles, they're built like tanks. They're easy to move. And there's something that the foreign tourist trade, which makes up a huge part of, the whole scene in the Japanese retro gaming community, are more familiar with stuff like the Famicom and the PC Engine.
Yeah,
so
it's much easier to just turn on a console and put a cartridge in and immediately see that it works. A game comes up, the sound comes out, that's working. It's a bit more complex with a computer, and also the media itself, the cartridges, either they work or they don't. You don't get a bad sector halfway through a cartridge generally. So
exactly.
It's easier for the business and the consumer, I think.
Nobody working at Super Potato wants to check and see which version of Kickstart is currently loaded on their Amiga. Now, Neil, this obviously matches the trends of arcades and physical game shops in general closing their doors. If you were going to open your own Super Potato, I don't know what you'd call it in England, maybe Super Bubble and Squeak, either in an arcade. Yeah, that's it. If you were going to open such an establishment in your neck of the woods, what do you think you'd have to do to actually make it successful?
It's difficult, isn't it? You need to cater to the demographic first and foremost. You can't open a video shop that looks and runs, a video game shop that looks and runs like it did 30 years ago and expect to be commercially successful on game sales alone, in my opinion, at least. So I think if you were to open one, you have to cater to the audience, including us oldies. You have to have what we call second gates in the retail world. So yes, you can come into the shop and say, oh, this is a cool shop and it's got all these games on the shelves, but you need the coffee shop, you need the maker space, you need all of these other things to draw the money in. I don't think you can do it on game sales alone. I know there are shops out there that do it, but a lot of them they're almost like a jumble sale. There's just stacks of stuff everywhere. You're squeezing through boxes that are piled up and not very nicely displayed. So I think if you want to do it well, you've got to have these second gates.
I agree with you.
Diversity in your shop.
I think the whole angle of doing a makerspace, or even offering classes, learn how to recap your classic computer, stuff like that brings in higher margins than game sales, and it also creates a community, and which is going to create, repeat buyers and repeat visitors.
Sure. Yeah, totally agree. Yep.
One bright spot before we move on to our second story. In doing some research for this story, I'm happy to report that Super Potato is still open. I'd heard that lots of these shops have closed, but Super Potato is still going strong. However, it's probably best to head over there sooner than later. It's one place every retro gaming fan should visit at least once.
So, John, listener KLR650_Iowa reports that Ken Williams, the founder of Sierra Online, has written a book called Not All Fairy Tales Have Happy Endings. The story is the rise and fall of one of the first and most successful video game companies ever. And even if you're not interested in the book, it's well worth visiting kensbook.com, where he's promoting it, just to look at the picture of all the big box Sierra games on the shelf on the landing page. It's a sight to behold, a collector's dream, just looking at that picture. Now, of course, Sierra became about a lot more than just point-and-click adventure games. It's the company that published Half-Life, after all, in the 90s. But it is the adventure games that saw the rise to power of the company in the 80s, and it's the genre that I most closely associate with Sierra, even to this day. Do you have a favourite adventure game from Sierra? Any of their series or a single game, John?
Oddly enough, my grandest Sierra memory as a small child, I'm talking about 4th or 5th grade, is not playing King's Quest or Police Quest or anything like that, but the original Leisure Suit Larry.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
right.
When you
pedaling in
weren't
filth.
supposed to be playing it, you were.
That's
You
right.
were being, yeah.
So one day I came home from school and I found that my family's beloved Atari 1200 XL had been kicked out of my father's study and into the living room because my dad had purchased a very unfriendly looking beige box, an IBM XT clone. This thing looked like it was not going to be a whole lot of fun. Looked like it was built for spreadsheets.
Yeah.
Of course, being bought from a local place, it came with several quote unquote free pieces of software already installed. I remember Leaderboard Golf on there, but the game that I played the most was Leisure Suit Larry. This was my first experience ever with a graphic adventure game. So I just assumed they were all like that. They all featured a lonely guy looking to get it on, though, my 8-year-old self was not precisely sure what that meant. And his adventure in Sleazetown.
It famously had the questions at the start of the game, the adult questions that you had to get through to get into the game. I mean, did you just memorize the answers as a kid?
There were several that I did not understand that I blindly guessed. And then when I realized that was the correct answer, because there was probably a bank of about 20.
That's right.
And it didn't take many passes through before you could kind of guess your way through there. I do commend the folks, Allo and the gang at Sierra for trying to put some child protection on there. It didn't stop me, Neil. I was in. I was all in.
I remember discovering many years later there's a key press. It's like X or Control X or something that just skips all the questions. I wish I knew that as a kid.
Yeah. It's funny though, because although of course there were many adult themes in that game, it was such, the thing that I remember the most about it was calling the taxi. The very first time I called the taxi, and I was like, there's no way this will work. A taxi won't come. And then a taxi rolls up right in front of the bar. And I was like, holy cow. And then I get in the taxi and he's like, where to, bud? And I was like, well, where would a guy like this go? How about a casino? And I typed in casino. Bam, I'm at a casino. So in my mind, I thought literally any destination I type, I will go to. This is the most amazing game. And of course, that wasn't what happened. But I have many, many happy memories of playing Leisure Suit Larry, of calling my friends who also inexplicably had Leisure Suit Larry, and playing through the game with them over the phone. It was a good time. Neil, how about you? What are your Sierra memories?
Leisure Suit Larry was well up there, to the point where I actually turned in an English school report that was based on Leisure Suit Larry. And I got an A for it.
Oh, amazing.
So Leisure Suit Larry aside, I'd have to go with Police Quest. The opposite end of the scale to Leisure Suit Larry on the humour spectrum, but they are linked because Leisure Suit Larry's creator, Al Lowe, was actually drafted in to help make Police Quest 1 playable. Jim Walls was the retired police officer who created Police Quest, but he made the game so brutal and difficult that he expected the player to know police procedure to be able to play this game to the letter. So I think it was Ken Williams who drafted in Al Lowe to make it more of a game, and it was still brutal, but it was a game that I enjoyed, and a series. I think Police Quest 3 was probably the one that I enjoyed the most.
I think that there were a whole series of games that were sort of based on the Sierra engine, right? Of course, King's Quest was the first. Police Quest was like that. Leisure Suit Larry, and I think Space Quest was also one in the series, wasn't it?
That's right. Space Quest as well. And that whole engine came about because of the IBM PC Junior. So IBM commissioned Sierra to make a game that wasn't possible on the Apple II. That was the brief. So it had to have more colors, it had to be bigger, it had to be better than anything on the Apple II. So that's where Ken Williams and Sierra created I can't remember the name of the first iteration of the engine now, but the engine that was the basis of all of those games. It was for the IBM PC Junior, but very cleverly, Ken kept in the contract that he kept the rights to the engine. And IBM said, well, we don't care, it's just a video game. It means nothing. And then, of course, the huge success of Sierra was based off of that first King's Quest engine on the IBM PC Junior. So, yeah, it's an interesting story, and no doubt something that will come up in the book, or at least I hope it would come up in the book, written by the man himself.
So, when is this thing coming out? When can I read Ken's new tome?
He's hoping that it will come out in October. He says he's still writing it on the website. It's not a Kickstarter as such. He's just making people aware that it's going to be available. So he promises insights into life before Sierra, the importance of that IBM PC Junior, and all of that good stuff, all the way through to the end of Sierra's life, which was a really sad tale when what came about, I won't spoil it for you, was at that time the greatest case of financial fraud in the history of the US. And that was part of the demise of Sierra. So it's a really interesting story. And I would recommend you check it out at kensbook.com if you want to find out more.
Neil, the Turbografx 16, otherwise known as the PC Engine outside of America, although in England, was it just the Turbografx? Is that right?
That's right. They dropped the 16.
Okay. It doesn't get a whole lot of love compared to its other 16-bit brethren. It was marketed as the first 16-bit console, though that was sort of a lie. It used a modified 8-bit CPU. I remember seeing ads for it in magazines and being more wowed by the fact that the portable version used the same media, the same hue card as the home console, but none of the games were super appealing to me. Not even Toilet Kids.
Yeah, not even It's a game I showed when I covered the system, Toilet Kids. Just mouth wide open. Who the hell came up with this game where your kid's on flying toilets, dropping turd bombs onto turtles down below? Incredible.
Yeah, not for me. And that feeling, it continues to this day. Now that I've had a chance to explore its library, it still doesn't exactly light a fire under me. But all this could be about to change. Knight Rider 82 on our subreddit has shared with us that there is a new game being developed for the Turbografx 16 that is right up my alley. It's called Jesse. Now, I'm not sure if it's Jaeger or Jaeger, if it's one of those foreign words. But anyway, Cleopatra's Curse is where Jesse is fooling around. Now, Neil, before we talk about the game, what are your thoughts on the PC Engine? Did it entice you as a youth?
Oh, as a youth, it was nothing more than a picture in a magazine. It was a strange and exotic machine from Japan. I know it was available in Europe, as you say. It was the Turbografx, and it was the PC Engine. Sorry, it was the Turbografx in the UK, but the PC Engine in the rest of Europe, I believe. But you never saw it outside of a specialist video game store. I didn't know anyone who actually owned one of these things. I didn't know the games that ran on it. It may have popped up from time to time on, video game TV shows where they did a head-to-head challenge and played something like, I can't even think of the name, R-Type, Darius, something like that. So that is as far as it went here. Specialist shops, TV shows, magazines. And of course, when I fixed one up here a couple of months back on my channel, that's when I really got to know the games library. And also we had the PC Engine Mini recently, which has really sparked interest outside of regions where it's otherwise not very well known. So, a lot of what I found in the games library was shoot 'em ups, and it's very well known for that genre. But I'm guessing Jesse Jaeger or Jesse Jaeger isn't a shoot 'em up. What's it all about?
All right, from now on, I'm just going with Jaeger. I think it's alliterative, okay. Neil. I'm going that way. So again, the name of this game is called Jesse Jaeger in Cleopatra's Curse, and it styles itself as a Metroidvania type 2D side-scrolling adventure game. I downloaded the demo, and I had to go with it, and I was actually pretty impressed. I love the character design of Jessie. She looks very similar in design to Terra from Final Fantasy III, if you're familiar with that game. Very highly detailed 16-bit character sprite. From the short time that I spent with the demo, I was very impressed with the level design. I thought it was good. I thought it controlled really tightly. This actually scratches an itch for me. Ever since Symphony of the Night, I've enjoyed Metroidvania-style games, but I haven't played any with this particular graphic aesthetic. I've played lots of games that have a more of a Metroid feel, where it's a sci-fi thing, or going the other direction, the Castlevania games that are all set in sort of the medieval Dracula and all that stuff. This is set in a sort of an Egyptian Indiana Jones type theme, and so it's pretty cool. Where do you stand on Metroidvania games, Neil?
Well, the PC Engine has got things like Castlevania Rondo of Blood, I think it is, on the CD-ROM system, and that's probably the game I've played the most since getting my own PC Engine and the CD-ROM system. It's just a fantastic game. A key part of these Metroidvania-style games is the exploration, so there's always an element of parts of the game map which are inaccessible until you've leveled your character up enough to jump high enough or have enough power to smash through a wall or whatever it is to get to that next part of the map. And there's always an element of retracing your steps back across the map. And that's why I find if it's not executed carefully enough, heading all the way back across a map to get to the next section can, if it's not done right, it can feel like lazy filler just to make the game longer. So there's a really fine balance to get you invested in your character, leveling up your character, feeling precious about not losing your character's abilities or killing them or whatever it is, and then keeping you interested in the game world. So it's a really fine balance. And when they get it right, like Castlevania Rondo of Blood or the follow-up one, which was on the PlayStation.
Symphony of the Night.
Dracula X. Yeah, Symphony of the Night. It was also called Dracula X, wasn't it? That's when they're considered to be the very best and the most groundbreaking of games. Did I see, is this game also going to be available on the Mega Drive?
That's right. It also has a Genesis port or a Mega Drive port as well. So even if you don't own a Turbografx 16, you can still get on board. And this thing is officially coming to market. There's an ongoing Kickstarter, but the developer, his name is Kyle Thompson. He's already reached and surpassed his $10,000 goal. I think if you're doing, I don't know anything about game development, Neil, but I do know that when you set a goal of millions of dollars for your indie game and it doesn't reach its goal, part of the fault lies with you. You've got to set your goals reasonably, and that is what Kyle has done. He asked for $10,000, which I think is completely reasonable. And he also priced these carts and these Hue cards at a very affordable level. You can get the Hue card for this game for $15. Wow, $15, Neil. We just played an Amiga game that asked for $30 for the digital edition only. Yeah. To me, that is the wrong way to go about things. I love getting, physical releases of things when I can. And for $15, it's a no-brainer. There's going to be a Turbografx Super CD version too, and a Genesis version is available with loose and boxed carts available. And of course, the pricing goes up from there. But I was blown away by that $15 Hue card. Where do you even go to get Hue cards made these days?
I don't even know. I don't know. But I'm certainly going to check this out. And the nice thing is when you support a project like this and a developer like Kyle, once they've got one successful Kickstarter like this under their belt, they've got their development tools set up, they've got their process set up for creating a game, and they can very quickly then knock out a follow-up game and get several games going. So it's really good to support someone like this, especially at just $15. Such a great price.
Yeah. So if you're interested in giving Cleopatra's Curse a spin, head on over to our subreddit for the link and the Kickstarter page and the demo. It's all over there.
John, the source code for Windows XP has been leaked, and this is reported by user Colony Activist over on our subreddit. Now, there's been talk of some of the source leaking in the past for Windows XP, but this was one great big torrent file this time, and it has been verified as having the source to the secrets of Microsoft's flagship 2001 operating system. And despite its age, this isn't just something that's fun to poke around in for historical purposes, because Windows XP still runs on 1% of the world's computers. And that includes cash machines, or ATMs, as you call them, John. So there's a very real security risk. And even though we've had Vista since then, we've had 7, we've had Windows 10, I suspect that there'll still be code in there that's very relevant to the current Windows. We still use the NTFS file system, for example. Kerberos is still the default authentication protocol in Windows. There's plenty of stuff in XP that's still relevant and can be picked apart by hackers. But on the flip side, and this is the bit that I'm more interested in, is the benefits to the open source world. So, for example, being able to see how XP works could help the Wine project for Linux owners, and that allows you to run Windows executables on Linux. Or it could help companies that are still using XP to make it more secure, even though security updates are no longer being published for it. So there's pros and cons to this leak. And it got me thinking as well about leaks. Is this the biggest software leak of its kind that you can think of? Or can you think of any other significant ones that you've come across, John?
Yeah, I can. I want to talk a little bit about this first, though. I think that, you mentioned that XP still runs on 1% of the world's computers. I guarantee you that number is going to shrink once this thing gets more out there in the open, because when you have the source code, you can do anything. You can peer into all the nooks and crannies and things. And it's amazing to me how many, mission critical pieces of hardware still run on XP. So hopefully this will spur, either developers, or I'm sorry, not developers, but, people that manufacture this equipment to upgrade their machines, because it does everybody a disservice. All it does is cut costs when you don't move forward. And speaking of the wine project, this actually has to do with the leak that I was going to talk about. This is 2020, Neil, and this is the time of source code leaks. This past July, the Big N, Nintendo, they had a major leak in which the source code for the Wii, the GameCube, and the N64 made its way onto the wilds of the internet. This actually... You'd think this would be, much rejoicing in the emulation community, but actually it caused a bit of a crisis, because part of the reason that emulators are legal is because they've been, well, at least in theory, completely reversed engineered. So they've been built from the ground up without any of the original source code. The source code of these systems, of course, is copyright. And if it's determined in court that source code was used in an emulator, Nintendo would have the right to shut those projects down and cease development immediately. And so, as we all know, Nintendo is not shy in summoning its lawyers. And the same thing could happen with the Wine Project. The Wine Project has been allowed to exist because very clever people have reverse engineered the Windows, code to be able to run in Linux. And if it's if this source code makes its way into the Wine Project, I'm pretty sure that Microsoft could pull the same trick, that they could go in and say, hey, we know that you've used our copyright source code in developing this project. You need to cut it out and cease development immediately.
Dangerous,
and of course,
isn't it? It's dangerous because they don't even have to look at the Wine source code to say you've copied it. Just having a copy of that Windows XP source code in an office where Wine is developed could be enough to get them in hot water, as opposed to developing in a black box scenario where they're just plugging in inputs and adapting the outputs and figuring out what to do in the middle. If there's any evidence that they've had that source code and they may have worked from it legally, that's probably enough to come down on them.
Right. I just don't understand, from a security standpoint alone, why people have not moved away from XP to Windows 10, especially with the price of Windows 10. Yeah.
It's always cost, yeah.
Yeah, I know that enterprise licenses are not cheap for this stuff, but XP at this point, getting close to 20 years old, and the security. I think that I read something once that if you install an XP machine and connect it to the internet, something like within 20 seconds, it will be compromised.
Yeah. There are valid reasons, though. I used to work in a factory that was full of CNC machines that did folded steel work, and the CNC machines had Windows XP in them. They could run, they did run completely offline, and you just went with a USB stick, plugged in your code, your file for it to create this piece of metal. And these are machines that are expected to run for 20, 25 years, if not longer. So why shouldn't the computer in there do the same? There are valid occasions for it. Yeah. But coming back to the original story, this isn't the first time that the Windows code has leaked. We've had portions of NT4 and Windows 2000 code leaked in the past. I don't think the entire Windows OS has been leaked in the past, so this is still quite a significant thing. But the small saving grace for everyone and for Microsoft is that this appears to be the Windows XP Service Pack 1 source code. And of course, Service Pack 2 came along, which was a huge overhaul of the OS, which was at the time being hammered by viruses, because this is when we were shifting to having our PCs always online, always connected. We had broadband coming in, so we weren't dialing up. So there was this much bigger risk, and Windows XP was wide open with Service Pack 1. It took Service Pack 2 to really shore it up and protect it. So the source code is all based on Service Pack 1. So it is an older version, but it will certainly be interesting to see what, if anything, comes about as a result of access to this code. So thank you for listening to This Week in Retro. Join our show subreddit and contribute your favourite stories from the world of retro.
Help us spread the word about the show by leaving us a review on your podcast app of choice, sharing our Facebook page, or just telling a retro-loving friend. See you next week for more up-to-date news
for out-of-date tech. Do you know, I said Super Tomato, and I'm starting to think now there might actually be a shop in Wales called Super Tomato. I'm going to have to look that up. Hang on, I'm just going to have to do a quick search.
Okay.
Bear with me, because I know there is one in Cardiff. Yes, it's called Super Tomato.
Oh,
somebody's already done it.
I'm going to leave that in the show. That's good to know.